Are you a property owner, existing property owner, soon to be property owner? Well, you want to listen to this video because what I'm about to share with you is going to directly impact you if it has not already. And we need to talk through how we're going to get on the other side of it. Yes, I'm talking about insurance premium increases. Nationwide, right? I just read an article, 35% were up from last year in terms of insurance premiums. Properties getting dropped left and right by insurance providers. Like, why is all this happening and what should we do in result of it? Okay. Now, I'm just going to gloss over why it's happening, okay, in broad strokes, because that's not even so much as to why it's important. The important part that I want to address is how do we maneuver around it as real estate investors, okay? So first of all, if you've been paying attention, I mean, let's even talk about post-COVID, right? If there even is such thing. Natural disasters have been happening far more frequent than in recent years, right? Or past years, excluding the pandemic. And so wildfires all over the place, hurricanes all over the place. I mean, just recently, right? I shoot this video, today is like July, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. As I shoot this video, Houston just got pummeled twice within the last 4 weeks with horrible storms, tons of damage, power outages all over the place. And so that's been a common theme in the country, in different parts of the country for a very long time, you know. And so what's happening in result of that is insurance providers are obviously paying out tons of money on these big claims that are coming in. And as a result of it, yeah, they ain't gonna eat all that themselves. So they gotta pass that cost through to the consumer, which is us. And as a homeowner, you know, there's just not a whole lot you can do, unfortunately, right? If it's your primary residence, you know, you got to look for other ways to decrease expenses because you certainly can't pass that off to anybody because you are the consumer of that. For us investors, however, we got to be real careful right now. We have to be very careful right now. Why? Because although we're in a position where we can pass some of that cost off. So for instance, say your premium goes up and it's going to cost you an extra $300 a month. Depending on your rental property and the area that it's in, maybe you can increase your rents $150, right, the following year to neutralize half of that. But if you're in a situation where your rents are already capped in your market and that goes up 300 and your net cash flow is 300, then you're breaking even now, right? And as we know as investors, you ain't breaking even on the property. You're losing money because it's not if something's going to happen, it's when something's going to happen. And so, yes, while some of y'all even watching this video, maybe y'all in Cali, maybe y'all in New York, maybe y'all in Vegas, you like, hey, I already buy for equity anyway, right? Which is great. I'm not knocking that. However, you know, we buy for cash flow first, then equity. Why? Because we have no control over equity. At the end of the day, the government, the feds, they change rates. All of a sudden, the market stalls, property values come down, as we've seen even in Austin, Texas, right? And now all of a sudden, your equity that you had is gone, okay? Now, you know, historically, real estate has always increased in value, right? But there are times where there are corrections, and if you only buying for equity, and you got a negative cash flow situation every single month, you got a burn rate on that money. When I say burn rate, I mean, if I'm renting this place out for $1,100, but my pity payment is $1,500, I got a burn rate of $400 every single month. That's $5,000 a year. Not even talking about the other additional expenses and or repairs and maintenance that come up at the property. So this is why we always look to buy for cash flow first and then equity as a byproduct of that, because the cash flow number is the real dollars and cents that's coming out of your pocket every month. The equity is something that shows up on the balance sheet unless or until you leverage the equity in it or sell it for a profit at some point. So everybody is experiencing this across the board, right? I've got 120 units. I've had one of my 6-unit buildings dropped by an insurance provider. We had to get re-anchored with another company. I've had a couple of policies that have gone up. I've got, you know, students who are down in the southern states who got dropped from insurance provider. One of my buddies out in California got dropped by insurance. So it's happening across the board, right? They're looking at their risk profile. They're looking at how much more expensive construction is now, and how much more expensive even the resources within the construction is right now. So when they're paying out these claims, they're noticing that the claims are more expensive, right? Because resources are limited, construction material and costs have gone up. So when they're looking at policies that they've previously written, they're like, man, either we're gonna have to increase this or drop this because it's gonna cost us too much on the back end based off of what we charged previously, right? So how do we safeguard ourselves against this, so to speak? The first thing is we have to be very conservative when we underwrite our properties, right? And when I say underwriting, I'm talking about evaluating deals. A lot of the time, we're basing the deal that we'll do based off of the maximum loan amount that a lender will give us. And I'm telling you, in today's climate, that's a dangerous game to play, right? So there's an element called the DSCR, the debt service cover ratio, which simply means how much the bank is willing to lend you, so as long as you hit this minimum requirement of how much profit you make every single month on this property, okay? And sometimes that could be as low as 1.2, right? Sometimes 1.1, okay? If you only go off of what the bank is willing to do, they're assessing it based off of their lending profile and their risk profile for them, right? And for whoever money that they're managing as they're putting it out in the marketplace. For you, however, though, you have to plan as if things are going to get worse, not better. So yes, while you can plan that you're going to have a 3% rent increase in your area year over year, that's great. But you also need to plan, and we can't plan for 35% insurance premium increases, but we certainly can plan that it will go up. And if it's not insurance, it will be property taxes, okay? And one of the biggest problems that I see for new investors, especially, everybody want to buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. I so hate that acronym. It's so long, right? But they want to essentially buy a property at some point, renovate it, rent it out, refinance it, pull equity out, and then repeat the cycle. It's a great way to expand your portfolio quickly. However, every time you pull equity out of a property, your debt service goes up. So let's just say you bought a property, you renovated it, rented it out, all the rest of it, your mortgage is $1,000. Now you want to go and pull 70 grand out of this property that you got in equity, and then your mortgage goes up to $1,600, right? So while, yes, you got $70,000 that you can go and deploy and put in other properties, but now you got a $1,600 mortgage. Well, maybe before, when the mortgage was $1,000, maybe you were renting it for $1,400, making $400 a month. But now you put this money out, you got negative $200 a month, and you think to yourself, well, you know what? I know I know that's like, $2,500 in a year, but I got this 70,000. I can go and, get 3 more properties real quick, and then I'll be making X amount of cash flow on those, and that'll cover my deficit. And I'm telling you right now, back in 2009, that got me in a lot of trouble, okay? Because property taxes and insurance increased. And that was the piece I didn't take into account. And before I looked up, I was underwater and I had negative rents every single month on top of everything else. And not to mention, what about when the tenant leaves? Because that happens. Or if they don't pay their rent, because that happens too sometimes. Now you stuck with that monthly nut. So this very thing that you call an asset has become your biggest liability, and you're going to work to pay for another liability, okay? So what does all this mean? What all this means is we have to become the expert at what we do. We cannot afford for lenders to tell us what type of loans we should be taking on our properties. We need to be telling them what type of loans and what type of exposure that we're willing to have on said investment. Because at the end of the day, once the ink dry, you locked into that thing until you're able to get out of it. And one of the hardest things to get out of is a bad property. because you know why? It's going to be a bad property for somebody else more than likely as well. And as you strip the equity out, now the mortgage payoff is higher. So if you got a property that's not cash flowing, and then all of a sudden you're trying to sell it to another investor, well, if they buy it, likelihood is that it won't cash flow for them either at that number. So now you got to sell it at a haircut and potentially lose money on the way out. So everything that we do is risk associated with it, right? However, we need to mitigate our risks as much as possible by getting thoroughly educated on how we should go out and use leverage and use lending in order to build our portfolio and do it safely so that we're not overexposed and we're doing the counterproductive thing. We're doing this to make more money, not to lose more money and have more bills. All right. If this video was helpful, if you want me to make a part 2 to this, where I actually walk you through some real numbers, comment below and let me know. And then I'll make a part 2 to this and walk you through some numbers. All right. Y'all have a good one.